Hello and welcome, listeners, to another episode of the Mindful Living podcast with your host, Sana. We explore on the Mindful Living meaningful insights to help you lead a healthier, more balanced life. Today, I am honored to be joined by Gene Burke. Now, listeners, with over 30 years of experience in operations management and a third Dan black belt in martial arts, Gene brings a unique fusion of leadership wisdom and martial arts principles. He's also the author of The Iron Road, Striking Success, and The Dojo of the Mind, offering practical guidance to all of us for personal growth, resilience, and mental wellness. And today on The Mindful Living, we are diving into how martial arts can transform leadership. Yes, you heard that right. And it's particularly for new and mid-level managers, helping them develop accountability, discipline, and the ability to lead with integrity, of course, with mindfulness. So, with that, Jean, welcome to the show. And as always, it's an absolute honor having you with us.
Thank you so much. The honor is mine. Appreciate it.
Okay, Jean, of course, I think the first question that will come to our listeners' minds is, how exactly does martial arts blend into leadership principles like discipline, focus, or resilience? How they can get translated into an effective leadership in the workplace?
Yeah, sure. So, they really do, and people wouldn't often think that they actually do translate or those skill sets from the martial arts can transfer into leadership, but they actually do in so many different ways and in so many different levels. So, martial arts instill in people the need to be disciplined because you have to stick to a particular, like if you're going to, if you've signed up in a different school, no matter what the art, actually, it doesn't matter what martial art it is, but it creates discipline in you because you have to actually go. So, you can sign up for something
Mm-hmm.
and not show up, and then that doesn't really do anything for you. So, discipline is very, very important in leadership because you have to stay focused on task. And there could be a million different things pulling you in different directions as a leader in business. And that discipline to be able to focus on task is critical. So not to be kind of moved or swayed away from what your core objective is at that time. Now, of course, in business, you need to be able to be flexible, which is part of the martial arts as well. And I don't just mean physically flexible. You need to be able to change to the reality that's happening in front of you. So, for example, let's say in the martial arts, in many different martial arts school, whether it's jujitsu or karate, taekwondo, so many different judo, whatever it may be, you're often facing an opponent in sparring sessions. So often what will happen is you may go what we would call round robins, right? So you might face 5 different opponents in a 20-minute rotation. Now, what that means is for a leader, you need to be able to be flexible because every one of your opponents brings a different skill set and a different challenge. So if you are not flexible in your ability to kind of change to what's happening in real time, you're going to fail or you're going to be tapped out or whatever it might be. So one of the things that translates also from the martial arts is the ability to adapt to what's happening real time. And in business, that may mean something has happened, whether it's one of your customers, one of your contractors, whatever it might be, the production of your material, if you're producing materials. And what do you do as a leader to be able to be flexible, to adapt and change to that changing dynamic? And how do you adapt your actions to be able to overcome those obstacles?
Yeah, I think the way you explained, it's very clear that how the strategies, technique, tactics, how they very well blend with uh, the real life scenarios for a leader as well. Especially the round robins when it obviously it's 5 opponents, and each of the opponent brings a unique set of challenges. So, yeah, I mean, definitely requires a lot of discipline, focus, resilience as well. And I think that kind of builds. I think also, Jean, you often emphasize the importance of accountability. You mentioned it, of course. So I think in both martial arts and leadership, accountability can be the difference between failure and growth. And we're talking about long term. So, what advice would you give to managers, especially because they are in that transition in between managing people and then leading people, and both are different. So, what advice would you give to them struggling, with holding their teams, or maybe motivating their teams, or maybe themselves?
Yeah, so great question. So, what people don't often expect, I think, especially new managers when they come into the work or when they are promoted in their role or they're coming into a particular new company. So often managers, their greatest, I don't want to really use the word challenge, but it's what's coming to mind now, is the people aspect of it. So, and that falls back, and accountability is a multi-layered thing. So as a leader, ultimately, you should hold yourself, and you are accountable. Let's say you're managing a particular department within a company. Ultimately, you are responsible and held accountable for everything that happens in that department with all of your employees, with the outcomes that the employees produce. So while they may be actually doing a certain function, whether they succeed or fail, ultimately you're accountable for. And you should hold yourself accountable for that. For example, it's like if you're in a department and something either succeeds, whether it's a project or a process, or fails, the buck should stop with you. So what's critical for a manager is not to own up to what they've been put in charge of, and not to put blame and on other people. Now, you can give explanations for why it failed or succeeded, but you can't cast blame. So there's a subtle difference in that. And then also for people, for accountability, you have to hold people accountable. So, once let's say, for example, you hire a new employee, or you have an existing employee and you're going into a new project, you have to provide them the tools to be able to succeed, the training that they need to succeed,
Yeah.
and then the flexibility to work through it. So, and then hold them accountable. And accountability, and that's also a really, really delicate balance in terms of how you approach. Let's say, for example, someone failed in a project. One of your employees, you gave them a task and they failed. I think what's really critical is to build up the employee. Let's say they've been given all the tools, they've been given all the training, you've given them everything they need to do, and they really did try, and yet they failed. How can you turn that around into a learning opportunity, right? Not just for the employee, but let's say, for example, I go back to a department. How does that translate into the department? On the flip side of that, let's say, for example, you've given everyone all the tools, all the training, everything they need to succeed, and they just choose not to do it for whatever reason. You have to have the strength to hold them accountable to that as well. And that can often take a different path. It's not as, I don't want to use the word supportive, but if someone is just blatantly not doing something because they just don't feel like doing it, again, you're ultimately accountable for everything that happens within that framework. And if someone's just choosing not to do it, you have to take a different path with that person. So accountability goes both to the manager and then also holding staff and new employees or existing employees accountable for their actions.
Hmm. Yeah, I do agree with you, but um, if let's think from another perspective, sometimes accountability can also create conflict. Uh, how do you suggest managers address it without damaging relationships or morale?
Yeah, so that's something that comes up quite a bit just in the business world and as a leader. So one of the things that I think is critical is, let's say, for example, you have to bring your team in to have a discussion, and you're holding people accountable, let's say for a failure, and it can be, and again, that's a difficult conversation to have with people. And it can be difficult, let me say, depending on how you approach it. So one of the things that I think is critical, especially in the business setting, is to emphasize the fact that nothing that is said in a meeting during conversations is personally directed. You know what I mean? Like, it can't be a personal attack,
Yes, yes, yes.
whether on the person or as a group. It has to be a business, right? A business reason, right? It can't be, hey, whatever. You have to focus the conversation on what the plan was, what the expected outcome was, and then why did it fail or why did it succeed? But in this case, why did it fail? And then you approach that conversation as, okay, we failed here. Let's say, for example, in a case of failure, how as a group do we modify our actions to succeed? And once you really stress the fact that you can't make it personal, I'll give you an example. So, I'm an operations manager by trade. And, not too long ago, I had to have a meeting with a group of people within a department, but there were subsets in the department, meaning there were different groups of people that fell under the same umbrella, but were in different categories within the department. And some of the groups in that department weren't really seeing eye to eye. So, I had a meeting with the team. I pulled everyone together, and I prefaced the meeting with, once I literally said this. This is a meeting to, balance what's happening, and for everyone to get on the same page and to understand, one, what the objective is, and then two, how each of your individual subsets of the department affect the other. And I told them right out, I said, the second someone starts throwing personalities into it, I'm going to shut the meeting down. And then we're going to go a different path. And then I'm going to talk to groups individually. And what happened with that was, we had one person who began to go, you could tell he was about to go a little bit down the personal side. And I said, whoa. What happened? Not who happened, but what happened. And I could tell you that meeting turned out to be fantastic because we had basically every member of the team. And what's really important, I think, for a leader is to empower your people. So, part of that meeting was everyone in that group, from literally, we had a couple of apprentices, who were fairly new in the company in that group. I opened the door to everybody. I said, I want feedback from everybody because everyone has an individual perspective of what's happening. Now that perspective may be wrong. And then you can educate that person or group into what the reality of it is in a positive way. But, if people feel like they're being heard, it energizes people to be more motivated and involved in the success of the group or the company. And it turned out to be a very successful meeting.
Yeah. Well, that's quite an inspiring story you shared, Gene. I think that can take can be taken as a great example in terms of addressing accountability. That too, I think with sustainability. Uh, Also, Jean, talking about your book, Striking Success, in that, I find this very much intriguing. You mentioned that martial arts teachers, it teaches leaders to remain calm under pressure. I think, to me, that is one of the most unique and difficult characteristic to build. It takes a lot of practice and resilience to build this quality, this skill. What strategies can leaders adopt to maintain that calmness, even when faced with high stress situations?
Yeah. So that's a great question. It's actually something that's really critical because when people, let's say, for example, if something happens and you get, let's say, within the group, let's say within the company, but I'll break it down to a department that's negative. And as a manager, if you react with an angry, emotional reaction to it, one, your message is not going to be well received. So typically, as people, because people are people, if someone's screaming at them, typically they're not really listening to what someone's saying. They're having a bunch of other sub thoughts about the person who's screaming at them. They're not really getting the message. And then two, another thing is if you're reacting in an angry way, you're not thinking clearly. Your emotions are overriding logic. And in business, you have to be logical. So I give you an example. So I know I keep going back to stories, but like everyone that works with me knows if they come into my office, for example, and I happen to be standing up and looking out my window, come back, because that means at that moment, typically, because it's the only time I do it, if something has happened that is, you know, that has irritated me, let's say, because of an action, because Matt, you're human. You're going to get irritated and you're going to get mad. I mean, it's just human nature. But I never react in emotion. I'll never address whether it's an individual or a department in an emotional way. So they know at that moment that I'm gathering my thoughts and I'm taking the time. I'm stepping away for myself to be able to work through the emotion, and then during that process, I think of what actions do I need to take, logical actions, not based on emotion, not based on I wish this happened. That's irrelevant. What is what is, right? So I could wish for, hey, I wish this happened, or I wish this person did that. That's meaningless. It doesn't add anything to the internal conversation in your head. So, I think it's really important for if something happens, and I'm using negativity because usually that's when emotions get involved. You could be really happy, but that's usually not a situation where someone's going to have a negative reaction and not think logically. But in situations where an outcome has been negative, or someone has done something really, really bad, or whatever it might be. And obviously there are some situations where you have to act immediately. But even in those cases, you shouldn't act with emotion. You should act with, hey, this is a business reason why. So I think it's really important for managers, especially new managers, to kind of gather themselves a little bit when something has hit them that is creating an internal turmoil, and kind of let the waters settle down a little bit. Because, we all know if you look at a pond and let's say there's a lot of wind outside and there's tons of ripples in the pond, you can't see beneath the surface. But, when it's calm out and the water is calm and clear, you could see some depth. And I think that's important in management, especially for new managers.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, I agree. I agree. Makes sense. And also, let's talk about failure, Gene. Something which both martial arts and leaders face frequently. What mindset shifts do you recommend for managers to view failure not as a setback, but as an actual opportunity to grow, to learn?
Yeah, absolutely. So, the reality of it is, every things fail, I mean, processes, we don't live in a perfect world. And no matter how good your plans are, there could be outside circumstances that may cause, or situations that may cause a plan to fail. So the only time you fail is if it keeps you down and it defeats you. The Japanese martial arts, I love this. I love this phrase. And it's 7 times down, 8 times up. Now, what that means is you're going to fail. But if you keep getting up, and here's the thing with failure, if you've learned something, some of my greatest insights, seriously, have been from a failure, because it forced me to look at a different path. The failure forced me to sit back and think about, well, why did I fail in that? And then reconsider the actions I took, or the path I took, or the plans I put in place, and reevaluate them. So, I think and again, more seasoned managers know this, but even they struggle with it. I mean, everyone struggles with it. I mean, failure is not a pleasant experience, but how you deal with it internally, and then how those internal feelings and thoughts can potentially create a different outcome that will help you succeed, then you're not failing. And I think that's really important for young managers, or I don't mean young, chronologically. I mean, managers who are new in their position, to understand that, things aren't always going to be perfect. And you have to be able to, be flexible to that, understand that. And then what do you learn from it and move forward?
Mm, right. Well, I think This is very interesting. I would really like to have your insights on this. So, martial arts is often seen as an individual journey focused on self mastery, while leadership is about guiding and influencing others. I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but do you think, Jean, there's a disconnect between the two, or is it like they complement each other perfectly?
Oh, that's another great question. So, I absolutely think they complement each other. So, with the martial arts, you are working towards, bettering yourself, uh, and and through leadership, and here's the thing: everyone's leading themselves. You in life, if it's possible, right? So, unless you own your own business, you're always reporting to someone. So you always had a leader, but both in the martial arts, and this translates, you have to lead yourself. Obviously you have a teacher that you're following, but you're leading yourself through that process. And the same thing in business or in life, really. So, you people can be people can choose to disengage from personal leadership, and that's why we see a lot of sometimes societal problems in the world because people aren't taking accountability for their own actions. They're not leading themselves. They're letting themselves be led by other people. And sometimes those people aren't particularly positive and they have a negative message. Or, internally, both from the martial arts and it translates into business, you have to lead yourself. There has to be an inside coach, an inside someone, your inner voice that's leading you and moving you towards better outcomes. So, with the martial arts, as you're going up through the different belts, let's say if your system has a belt, some systems may not have belts, but there's always a set of progressions. Like what goal? There's always goals that you're moving towards. And while you do, you have a leader in your teacher. You still have to internally you have to lead yourself through discipline, through consistency, through, wanting to have it. And that translates into business. It's the same thing. You have to lead, you could be a supervisor that you're reporting to a direct manager to, but you're still leading people. So how do you lead yourself? One, to lead your people, but then also be open up to be able to follow the lead of your manager, and I think that's really important. I think they absolutely intersect.
A great answer, Jean. Great answer. And do you think martial arts also help? Because in many of my conversations with guests, I have found there's an innate connection between leadership taking effective decisions and intuition playing a very important role in that. So, does martial arts play any role in building that intuition? Because it definitely requires a lot of mindfulness and uh, you know, inner wisdom, as you mentioned.
Yeah. Yeah. So, it's kind of interesting. So with the martial arts and there's kind of a subset to martial arts because they can be two different things, but they kind of do intersect. So with self-defense as well. So, one of the things that is really critical and in the martial arts too. So let's say I'll use martial arts right now as an example of how it can translate into business. So, martial arts, let's say, for example, you go to, I don't know, let's say a tournament and you have a new set of people who are standing in front of you. You'll often get a gut feeling about, let's say you're going to spar someone. You'll often get a gut feeling about what that person, you may not, you probably won't know the person, but
Mhm.
typically we read body language. There's a lot of things that go on subconsciously that we don't even think about. And it's your intuition. It's your gut feeling. And you really have to listen to it. Same thing in self-defense. So, typically, different than we're kind of different in the fact that, like, let's say, for example, an animal is out in the field and they get a bad vibe about something and they get a gut feeling. We call it instinct, and they run away. Part of the challenge that we have as humans is we can think that away. So we often override our own instincts. So we'll get like let's say, for example, someone gets on an elevator and you're on an elevator and someone comes on and you immediately get a bad feeling. Well, you know what? There's something that we don't understand consciously that's reading that person. It's a gut feeling. It's an intuition. And, 9 times out of 10, it's right. Not always right, but, we have to listen to our instincts. Same thing in business. So if you're going into, let's see, as a manager, you're going to meet a contractor and you're going to work to set up some business dealing, and you get a bad vibe.
Yeah.
Be conscious that you're getting a bad vibe. There's a reason.
Yeah.
Now, it may not be true, but it should cause you pause. You should pause for a second and think, why am I feeling like this? So I think that's one of the things that we in the West, especially, I think we've moved away from that. And we always, we're always overthinking. Everyone's always overthinking about everything. And I think sometimes we're not listening to, our natural instincts that are giving you a positive or a negative intuition. And the same thing, you could walk into a room and suddenly, you see someone,
Yeah.
you get a really good vibe from that person. Well, it's the same thing.
I agree. I agree. Lovely, lovely, Jean. This was such an interesting conversation. I believe, uh, I think leadership and martial arts, they have so much in blend. I think there's a beautiful intersection there, which I think our potential leaders, the leaders of the futures, can explore. So, if our listeners would wish to connect with you and if they wish to check out your books as well, especially the Dojo of the Mind, which is your latest one, how they can do that?
Oh, thank you. So my books can be found on Amazon.com, and you would just type in books by Gene Burke, and the 3 books will pop up. And we also have a website, and it's thirdmonkeypro.com, and our books. And we also actually on the website, I've put up some. It's called Soft Skills and Self-Defense.
Okay.
So it's all the things about self-defense that aren't about techniques, things like intuition, things like all that stuff. The things that are not often talked about. So there's a series of videos there that people could watch, and they're free. So that's also found on the website. I appreciate that.
Great, great. We'll have all the details mentioned in the show notes. And Jane, thank you so much for this incredible, insightful conversation. I absolutely loved how you have shown that leadership isn't just about managing tasks, but I think it's about mastering oneself and inspiring others. So thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure. Thank you.
So, listeners, for anyone interested in diving deeper into Gene's teachings, I would highly recommend checking out his books, The Iron Road, Striking Success, and The Dojo of the Mind. You can also check out his website. You can refer to all the links and details in the show notes along with this episode. And thank you to all of you for tuning into this episode of the Mindful Living podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to us. And if you found today's conversation valuable, please share it with others, your colleagues, your friends, your loved ones who might benefit. Until next time, take care and stay mindful. Thank you.